It's been 5 years since the official announcement of Daft Punk's disbandment. They've left behind a more than lasting legacy of great music and visual art. If anything, the fame and recognition of the duo has only gotten bigger since then. But what is it about this band in particular that has struck a chord with such a mass audience? One aspect that sets them apart from other artists is their consistent fascination with sci-fi imagery. When listening to albums like Discovery and Random Access Memories, it's easy to conjure up intricate stories of these worlds and these two robots longing to be human. One question I and some others have wondered about their catalog is whether their music held one continuing fictional storyline, similar to a concept album in the way other artists like 21 Pilots do. Their music often revisits repeating themes and ideas, and accompanying films and music videos portray the robot personas as characters. So it's not a stretch to ask if the story goes deeper. I'm not the first person to pose this theory, as others across the internet have before, nor do I necessarily know whether this was the artist's intention. This is just going to be my personal attempt to create a fictional timeline for the band, and to interpret the various imagery and ideas of their lyrics. The story starts much the same as the band themselves. Thomas Bangalter and Guy-Manuel de Homem-Christo formed Daft Punk in 1993 as part of the French house electronic music scene in Paris, after their previous band, Darlin, failed to make an impact on the public. After an EP and a set of singles, Homework was released and was an immediate critical success, and made Daft Punk one of the first house acts to be signed to a major record label. From the outset, the duo were repelled by the idea of superstardom and wanted to separate their DJ work from their private lives. It was during this era that they began experimenting with releasing singles under a different name and wearing Halloween masks to concerts and interviews. The album's subsequent music videos reflected this philosophy, and the seeds of what would eventually give the band their unique touch was planted. These videos were later compiled in the DVD release Daft, a story about dogs, androids, firemen, and tomatoes. And directors like Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry gave their surreal visions to the videos, which showed a world similar to ours, but one with humanoid dogmen and other anthropomorphic creatures. They showcase a time where music and the world around was changing. Electronic music was evolving, independent artists were on the rise, and the underground music scene was given a larger voice it didn't previously have. And Daft Punk was at the center of this revolution. One case in particular is the story of Charles, a man with dog-like features who struggles to fit in modern-day New York City. His dog-like persona, like the masks Daft Punk will become known for, reflects his alienation with the confusing world around him. That is, until he's reunited with a childhood friend, Beatrice, who he later moves to LA with to become an actor. Shortly after this time is when the real-life DJs and the fictional story of the robots split apart. When asked about the origin of the Daft Punk personas, Bangalter gave this reason. On September 9, 1999, while working on their next album, an accident occurs when one of the duo's samplers explodes and the DJs require emergency experimental surgery to survive. The duo later wakes up having had their human bodies been almost entirely replaced with robotic parts, and only their brains and hearts remain of their biological origins, and Daft Punk as we now know them were reborn. Discovery was released in 2001 and debuted the new robotic Daft Punk. The album itself differs from its predecessor by heavily utilizing sampling, a technique of using pre-existing music clips and remixing them into new compositions, and is the first time to include guest features such as Romanthony and Todd Edwards. This change in sound reflects the new metallic identities of Daft Punk. Like them, the album is noticeably robotic, especially songs like Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, but takes from human sources like other bands from the disco era and current-day artists to give a beating heart to the album, and the duo attempt to communicate that they are still human deep down. Discovery stands out among their albums because it is a concept album and is the only one to have an official story within it, which is revealed in the 2003 anime film Interstellar 5555, the story of the secret star system. The story follows an alien rock band known as the Crescendolls, who are kidnapped from their planet and are brought to Earth and are disguised and brainwashed as humans. The band's music finds worldwide success on Earth and wins a golden record for their album Discovery, with Daft Punk as one of their admirers. An alien from their planet and fan of the band named Shep learns of their kidnapping and travels to Earth to remind the band of their extraterrestrial origins. He succeeds in restoring their memory, but is killed in the process. The band investigates their manager, Earl the Darkwood. They discover a secret room in his mansion and find that he's a leader of a cult that's been responsible for kidnapping various aliens throughout the years, and using their musical talents to obtain 5,555 gold records, which will give him control over the whole universe. The band defeats Darkwood and exposes his actions to the world, revealing the existence of aliens to humanity. The world helps the Crescendals and the fellow stolen aliens to return to their home worlds. The film ends with a young boy going to sleep, surrounded by toys of Daft Punk and the aliens, and their albums in his room. It's up to interpretation whether the story was just a fantasy of the boy or if it really happened. For the sake of this theory, let's say that it did happen and the boy became a fan of the two groups after their success. That leaves Daft Punk in a world where the existence of aliens is known and the sins of the music industry are made public. Among the chaos, Daft Punk reached superstar status in this new world, fitting in among the aliens and other creatures who have a place where they previously didn't, which may hold an explanation to the odd creatures that lived in this world in the previous era, as the Around the World video and others like it could have been another exploitation by Darkwood. At this point, Daft Punk has cemented themselves as household names beyond their underground beginnings, but at this time in their careers, they attempt to get more in tune with a deeper side of themselves. Human After All starts as a declaration of Daft Punk's human side, but in the process only proves to stray farthest from humanity that they would get. It takes the cold and technical side of Daft Punk's music to its extremes. The album for the most part discards the sampling of the previous outing for a harsher and more industrial sound. Technologic feels like a darker counterpoint to Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, and songs like Prime Time of Your Life, Steam Machine, Robot Rock, and Television Rules the Nation are filled with nothing more than computer-like commands and declarations. Even songs like Make Love and Emotion, which would normally be emotional centerpieces, can't get past the initial thoughts being repeated in robotic voices. Even in the music video space, the album's shorts show a creepier world taken over by television and the media, which, like Homework, it reflects the time in which it was created. The stars resemble robotic skeletons, and the citizens are over-concerned about their appearances to a deadly degree. After exposing the ugly side of the record industry, the robots become more conscious of the negative effects of music on the listeners. For the first time, the mainstream can relate to the robots' feelings of alienation, which brings us to Electroma. In 2006, Daft Punk opted to try their hand at directing an avant-garde feature film, which continues and at first seems to conclude the robot's journey to becoming human again. What stands out about the film is that none of Daft Punk's music features anywhere in the film. It's underscored by a soundtrack of pre-existing music by artists like Todd Rundgren, Brian Eno, and Curtis Mayfield. It's a sole experiment in separating the characters of the robots from the music and exploring their story on a more personal level. The film begins with the robots driving through the American desert to a town where everyone shares their silver and gold helmets. This starts right where Human After All left off, and shows that their message has been fully received by the public. Their fame is at its height, and everyone seems to be a Daft Punk fan, even in small towns like this. They come to their destination, a scientific laboratory where they undergo an experiment to replace their robotic features with human skin. The result is shocking and uncanny, and the public who shared their alienation before now feels alienated by those they found relief in. The public rejects their transformation and turns on the robots as their new flesh begins to melt in the hot sun. By attempting to don unique identities of their own, they lose what made them relatable in the first place, their sudden turn mirroring the lesser reception of Human After All. They shed their new skin and continue their journey on foot, until Tomas suddenly stops and asks Guy-Manuel to activate his self-destruct sequence. Tomas explodes, and Guy-Manuel continues on until he too stops and unmasks himself and destroys his helmet. He uses a shard of his helmet to set his hand on fire and watches it burn to the robotic skeleton underneath. The film ends with him walking fully on fire into the distance. The robots have tried and failed to become human again, and this seemingly marks the end of their journey, as evidenced by their epilogue video being the scene of Thomas exploding. But Electroma is often the endpoint by those who pose this timeline theory, and it could be, but it feels unresolved and leaves the question of the placement of random access memories. After 8 years and a brief stint of scoring Tron Legacy, which I'm not officially placing in this theory as that deals with a different IP altogether, although there are ways that you could, the robots finally return to give one more gift to the world of music. The album introduces another shift in sound from the previous, bringing in more collaborators than there were in Discovery, and has a sound that distinctly throws back to the 70s disco era. It's their most complete sounding album yet, and by far has the greatest depth lyrically. More than just being a clever pun about computer memory, as the title suggests, the album feels almost like a memory of a time gone past. A memory of both the history of the band and its journey to becoming human, and the genre of electronic music itself, which was pioneered by Giorgio Moroder, the subject of one of the songs. The songs featuring collaborators reflect that era of the shift from analog to electronic. On the other hand, the lyrics to the songs written by the duo at first seem to show the same longing that they did before, but this time there's more finality and feel like they're written from a state of limbo. Within tells of someone without identity or form traveling a vast unfamiliar expanse. The robots may have destroyed themselves physically, but something lives on. Some version of their consciousness remains beyond their bodies, in some new frontier like the internet or space. The song Touch could practically be the theme to their entire career, as it rescored their epilogue and brings a finale to their quest for humanity. As the lyrics beautifully put, "You've almost convinced me I'm real." Appropriately, Beyond moves beyond the flesh, dreams, and their physical realm and into something greater, while Fragments of Time ruminates on their years as musicians and the legacy they choose to leave behind, as the robots have finally regained their faith in the positive effects of music. And finally, Contact suggests what's ahead for the robots. The song contains a recording from the Apollo 17 mission describing a bright object in space. The robots in their long voyage to become human have transcended beyond humanity, possibly with the help from the aliens from the Discovery era. And with that, the album closes optimistically with the quote, "There's something out there." The album completes the 4-album journey that Daft Punk has gone on, mimicking all the ups and downs of a band. They've gone through their underground beginnings, their discovery and jump to the mainstream, their big change in sound and accompanying fan backlash, and finally, as Random Access Memories marks their return, they leave one final magnum opus for their fans and submit their legacy. Daft Punk spent their last years as a band doing collaborative work with other artists, most famously with The Weeknd on his album Starboy. The Weeknd, like Daft Punk, is an artist who utilizes recurring characters and themes in his music and accompanying media, which could fill a whole video themselves. They intersect with Daft Punk's lore in the music videos for the songs Starboy and I Feel It Coming. In Starboy, the robot duo is briefly seen on a painting hanging in the Weeknd's apartment. They're depicted in a fantasy setting in regal clothing in what doesn't appear to be an earthly location. The video came at a time in the Weeknd's career where his real-life self and fictional persona split ways, again mirroring Daft Punk. In I Feel It Coming, the Weeknd appears on an alien planet, which at a later point is shown frozen over with the only inhabitants being the two robots, who look over some glowing object left behind by the singer. So what does this mean? Well, after having moved on from humanity, and as their last album suggested, the duo takes on a more guiding role, passing the torch on to the next generation of artists who are inspired from a young age by the singing robots. The same way Daft Punk themselves started their career giving thanks to the artists who inspired them. So in that way, the story comes full circle. These younger artists prove that feeling alienated from the mainstream or disconnected from one's own identity or body is a concept that will always be relevant, even if it presents itself in ways other than they did at the time when Daft Punk was coming onto the scene. That may be why Daft Punk appeals to such a mass audience as opposed to traditional music stars. That disconnect of the robot identities is refreshing and intriguing, and it allows people to see themselves and relate their own anxieties in the robots rather than observe one specific artist's personal life who they may not relate to at all. They become a blank canvas for the viewer to fill in. In that way, the robots finally achieved their goal in becoming human, just not in the way that they were expecting. That's why Daft Punk's music and others like it will always have relevance to the public no matter what the mainstream looks like. So there's the theory as I see it. I've heard other theories about what their music and lyrics mean, including finding ways to incorporate the Tron Legacy soundtrack and other features they've made over the years. So comment if you think this theory rings true or if you can think of other variations you can add to it.